I am Sabrina Wilson, 68 years old with gray hair that tells stories of a lifetime. My son Jacob called saying our family dinner was canceled due to a kitchen emergency at the restaurant. Exhausted from my volunteer shift, I decided to pick up takeout from the same restaurant anyway. Walking through those doors, my heart froze. There they were, my entire family laughing around a table loaded with food. The birthday celebration I had planned to pay for. Before I continue this story, where are you watching from? Hit that subscribe button because what happened next changed our family forever. When you spend 45 years teaching third graders, you develop a special kind of patience and wisdom. That patience served me well during my career, but nothing prepared me for the sting of betrayal from my own son. Let me tell you a bit about our family so you understand why this hurt so deeply. I retired from Lincoln Elementary 5 years ago after dedicating my life to other people's children. Now at 68, I spend my days trying to enjoy the simple pleasures I postponed during those busy teaching years. My husband Richard passed away when our son Jacob was just 12 years old. Cancer took him quickly, leaving me to raise our boy alone on a teacher's salary in our small 2-bedroom house in Springfield. Those years were challenging but beautiful in their own way. I worked extra tutoring jobs on weekends to make sure Jacob never felt the financial strain. When he wanted to play baseball, I found a way to afford the equipment. When he needed braces, I picked up summer school classes to cover the cost. I skipped new clothes for myself for years so he could have what he needed. Not because I had to, but because that's what mothers do. Jacob grew into a wonderful young man. He excelled in school, earned a scholarship to State University, and built a successful career as an accountant. At 42, he has a beautiful family of his own now. His wife Amanda, 39, came from a wealthy family and has always had certain expectations about lifestyle. I tried not to let it bother me when she would make comments about my modest home or my sensible car. The important thing was that Jacob seemed happy, even if Amanda always kept a certain distance between us. My grandchildren are the light of my life. Lily is 16 now, bright and artistic like her grandmother, though she rarely looks up from her phone these days. Thomas is 14, quiet but thoughtful with his grandfather's kind eyes. I treasure every moment with them, even as they've grown more distant in recent years under Amanda's influence. My financial situation is comfortable but not extravagant. I have my teacher's pension and Richard's Social Security benefits. I can afford small luxuries occasionally, but I'm still careful with money, a habit formed during those lean years as a single mother. When Jacob's 43rd birthday approached, I wanted to do something special. I decided to treat the whole family to dinner at Romano's, the fanciest Italian restaurant in town. It would cost nearly $300, but I had been saving up specifically for this occasion. The week before the dinner, I was filled with excitement. I made the reservation a month in advance to get the best table by the window. I called Jacob twice to confirm everyone could make it, and he assured me they were looking forward to it. Amanda even texted to say it was thoughtful of me. I planned to wear my best dress, the navy blue one with silver accents that Richard always loved. That Thursday, I spent 8 hours volunteering at Hope House, the local homeless shelter where I serve meals twice a week. It was an especially busy day, and by 4:30 my back was aching from standing so long in the kitchen. Still, I hurried home to shower and change for our 6 o'clock reservation. As I was putting on my earrings, my phone rang. It was Jacob. "Mom, I'm really sorry, but dinner's canceled tonight," he said, his voice sounding rushed. "There's some kind of kitchen emergency at Romano's. They called and said they can't accommodate us." My heart sank with disappointment. I had been looking forward to this evening for weeks. "Did they offer to reschedule?" I asked. "No, they were pretty swamped. Listen, I've got to run. Amanda's calling me. We'll figure something out later, okay?" Before I could respond, he had hung up. I sat on the edge of my bed, still holding my other earring. The abruptness of the call struck me as odd, but I brushed the feeling aside. Restaurant emergencies happen, I reasoned. After changing out of my dress and back into comfortable clothes, I realized I was still hungry. I hadn't eaten since a small lunch at noon. The thought of cooking held no appeal after my long day at the shelter. That's when I decided to drive to Romano's anyway. If they were having kitchen problems, perhaps their takeout was still operating. At the very least, I could get information about rescheduling our special dinner. Little did I know that this simple decision would reveal a truth that would shake the foundation of my relationship with my son and his family. The evening air was crisp as I pulled into the Romano's parking lot. I noticed there were plenty of cars, which seemed strange for a restaurant supposedly experiencing a kitchen emergency. Still, I reasoned that perhaps they were only limiting new customers while serving those already seated. I straightened my casual sweater before entering, suddenly self-conscious about not being dressed up. The warm glow of the restaurant's elegant interior welcomed me as I stepped through the heavy wooden doors. The hostess, a young woman with a polite smile, greeted me. "Good evening, ma'am. Do you have a reservation?" "Actually, I was told there was a kitchen emergency and wanted to see if I could order takeout," I explained. "Kitchen emergency?" She looked confused. "We've been operating normally all evening. Would you like a table?" Before I could respond, my eyes drifted past her to the main dining area, and that's when my world tilted on its axis. There, at the best table by the window, sat my family. Jacob, Amanda, Lily, and Thomas, all dressed elegantly, sharing a meal that was clearly in full swing. My body reacted before my mind could catch up. My heart began racing so fast I could feel it pounding in my ears. My hands trembled as I clutched my purse tighter. I stepped behind a decorative column out of their line of sight, unable to move or think clearly. From my hidden vantage point, I could see them clearly, while remaining unseen. Amanda was dressed in a stunning red dress, her blonde hair perfectly styled. She was gesturing animatedly as she spoke, looking completely in her element. Jacob sat beside her in his best suit, the one I had helped him pick out last Christmas. He was smiling, but there was something tight about his expression that I recognized from childhood, a tension around his eyes that appeared whenever he was uncomfortable, but trying to hide it. Lily and Thomas sat across from them, both looking bored, despite the beautiful surroundings. Lily was scrolling through her phone under the table, occasionally looking up to nod at whatever was being said. Thomas was slumped slightly in his chair, pushing food around his plate. As I stood frozen, I could hear snippets of their conversation carried to me across the restaurant. "The lobster ravioli is divine," Amanda was saying as she signaled the waiter. "Let's get another bottle of that Barolo." "Mom's not going to be happy when she sees the bill," Jacob said quietly. Amanda rolled her eyes. "Oh, please," she offered to treat us. "Besides, she doesn't need to know we ordered extras. We told her 6 o'clock, but 7:30 works so much better with my yoga schedule. She never has evening plans anyway." My stomach clenched at the casual cruelty of her words. I watched as the waiter brought another expensive bottle of wine to their table. I recognized it as one that cost over $100. My entire body felt cold, despite the warmth of the restaurant. A different waiter approached me, breaking my stunned observation. "Are you all right, ma'am?" he asked gently. I stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. He looked at me more closely. "Are you Mrs. Wilson? The reservation was under Wilson, right?" How did he know? Then I realized I must have been on their list for the original reservation. "Yes," I whispered, finding my voice. "That's my family over there." The waiter's expression shifted to one of confusion. "But they said you couldn't make it tonight. There was some emergency with your sister." Another lie. I have no sister. The conflicting emotions washing over me made it difficult to think. Hurt so profound it felt physical, betrayal that cut deeper than any knife. Confusion about how my son, the little boy I had sacrificed so much for, could do this to me, and underneath it all, a slow-burning anger beginning to take hold. As I stood there, I remembered other moments over the past few years. The family vacation photos on Jacob's social media that I only learned about after they returned. The holidays where plans changed at the last minute. The times when Amanda answered Jacob's phone and made excuses for why he couldn't talk. A pattern emerged that I had been too trusting to see clearly. "Ma'am, would you like me to let them know you're here?" the waiter asked. "No," I said quickly, finding clarity in that one decision. "No, please don't." I could have marched over to their table and confronted them. Part of me wanted to, but something held me back, a desire to understand the full extent of what was happening before I acted. From my position, I heard Amanda speak again, louder this time, as she had another glass of wine. "It's so much nicer without Sabrina here, always asking about the kids' grades and telling those endless stories about Jacob as a baby. She means well, but she's such a downer sometimes." Jacob didn't defend me. He just nodded slightly and took another drink of his wine. In that moment, something hardened inside me. The initial shock was transforming into something else, something that would give me the strength for what was to come. I thanked the waiter and walked out of the restaurant without being seen by my family. As I stepped into the cool night air, I felt as though I had aged 10 years in those few minutes. The drive home passed in a blur, my mind replaying what I had witnessed, while my heart struggled to accept it. The house was dark and silent when I returned home. I didn't bother turning on more than a single lamp as I sank into my worn armchair still in my coat. For nearly an hour I sat motionless, trying to process the scene I had witnessed at Romano's. As the initial shock began to fade, memories flooded in each one, taking on new meaning in light of tonight's revelation. I remembered the Christmas when Jacob was 9, and I had worked night shifts at the grocery store to buy him the bicycle he wanted. The pride in his eyes when he rode it for the first time is something I'll never forget. I recalled the time I sold my mother's antique brooch, the only valuable thing I owned, to pay for Jacob's senior class trip to Washington, D.C. I never told him where the money came from, just delighted in the photos he brought back. When Jacob was 17, he came down with severe pneumonia. I spent 3 nights sleeping in a hospital chair beside his bed, still going to teach my class each day. I would grade papers under the dim hospital lights, determined not to let either my son or my students down. After Richard died, there were times I skipped meals, so Jacob could eat properly. Not because we were destitute, but because growing boys need good nutrition, and sometimes the budget only stretched so far. He never knew about those missed meals. I made sure of that. Every sacrifice seemed to parade before my eyes, not because I regretted a single one, but because I couldn't reconcile that boy with the man who would lie to me and allow his wife to mock me behind my back. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Jacob. "Hope you're having a good evening, Mom. Just checking in." The casual deception in those few words made my stomach turn. This wasn't a genuine inquiry, but a cover for his conscience. I set the phone down without responding. With shaking hands, I opened my laptop and navigated to Jacob's social media page. I rarely checked it, respecting his privacy, but tonight was different. Scrolling through recent posts, I found photos from earlier that day, a family outing at the local botanical gardens, in my favorite spot by the koi pond. Amanda had tagged it 4 hours before. No annoying interruptions today, just quality family time. They had planned a full day of activities without me, culminating in the dinner I was supposed to pay for but not attend. How many other events had I been deliberately excluded from? I continued looking through older posts and found numerous family gatherings I knew nothing about, weekend trips, school events for the grandchildren, small celebrations where everyone was present except me. My phone rang, startling me. It was Dorothy, my closest friend since our teaching days together 30 years ago. "Sabrina, are you all right? You were supposed to call me after the big dinner." I had forgotten our arrangement to chat about how the evening went. As Dorothy's concerned voice came through the speaker, something broke inside me. The tears I had been holding back came in a flood as I told her everything. "Oh, Sabrina. I'm so sorry," she said when I finished. Her voice held a note I couldn't quite identify. "You don't sound surprised," I said suddenly. A long pause followed. When Dorothy spoke again, her voice was gentle but hesitant. "I didn't want to hurt you, but I've noticed patterns over the years. Remember last Thanksgiving when they said they couldn't make it because Thomas was sick? I saw them at the mall that same day, all 4 of them shopping and laughing. Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, a new pain blossoming. "Would you have believed me over Jacob?" Dorothy asked softly. "You love him so much, Sabrina. Sometimes love can blind us to difficult truths." She was right. I would have made excuses for him, found some explanation that protected the image of my devoted son. How long had I been doing exactly that? After talking with Dorothy for nearly an hour, I finally said goodnight. Sleep was impossible. I paced my small living room until dawn, my mind racing between memories of the past and harsh realities of the present. By morning, something had shifted inside me. The overwhelming hurt was still there, but now it was accompanied by a slow, burning anger that I had never allowed myself to feel toward my son before. As the first light of dawn filtered through my curtains, my phone rang. Jacob's name appeared on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered. "Morning, Mom." His voice was cheerful, as if nothing was wrong. "How are you doing today?" "I'm fine," I said, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. How was your evening?" "Oh, quiet. We just had sandwiches at home after the restaurant canceled. Such a disappointment. Maybe we can reschedule for next week." The lie came so easily to him, not a hint of hesitation or shame. I almost confronted him then and there, but something held me back. I needed to understand the full extent of this deception. "That sounds nice," I said instead. "Let me check my calendar and get back to you." "Great, oh, Amanda's calling me. Gotta run. Love you, Mom." The call ended before I could respond. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the phone in my hand. The casual "I love you" felt like another lie on top of all the others. With hands that no longer shook, I opened my banking app to check my credit card statement. There it was, a pending charge from Romano's Italian restaurant for $437. Significantly more than I had budgeted for the evening. They had not only excluded me from the dinner I was paying for, but had ordered extravagantly, knowing I would cover the bill. I called the restaurant directly, asking to speak to a manager about a charge on my credit card. "Of course, Mrs. Wilson," said the manager after I explained who I was. "I have the details of your party's order right here." He proceeded to list multiple appetizers, the most expensive entrees on the menu, 3 bottles of premium wine, and several desserts. When I asked who had authorized the charge to my card, his answer confirmed my worst suspicions. "The lady in your party, Mrs. Amanda Wilson, specifically instructed us to charge everything to your card on file. She mentioned it was a gift from you." I thanked him and hung up, a new wave of anger washing over me. Using my name, directing charges to my account, all while excluding me from the event itself. The calculated nature of it all was what hurt the most. The doorbell rang just after noon, startling me from my thoughts. Through the window, I saw Jacob's car in the driveway. I composed myself before opening the door. "Hey, Mom." Jacob stood there with a small container in his hands. "I brought you some tiramisu that Amanda made last night. It's really good." The restaurant logo was clearly visible on the side of the container. Another lie right to my face. "That's so thoughtful," I said, accepting the dessert I had unknowingly paid for. "Would you like to come in for coffee?" Jacob glanced at his watch. "Sure, I can stay for a few minutes." As we sat at my kitchen table, Jacob seemed unusually fidgety. He kept checking his phone and steering the conversation to trivial topics. I watched him with new eyes, noticing the way he avoided direct questions about the previous night. "So, are we good for rescheduling the dinner next week?" he asked as he prepared to leave. "Same restaurant." "Let me think about it," I replied. "I might have some volunteer commitments coming up." A flash of relief crossed his face. "No problem. Just let us know what works." As I walked him to the door, he took a call from Amanda. I stood on the porch waving as he backed out of the driveway, but he was too engaged in his conversation to notice. As his car idled at the end of my driveway, I could clearly hear his side of the conversation through the open window. "Yeah, I just dropped off the dessert. No, she doesn't suspect anything. I know, but what else could I do?" I stood frozen on my porch as he drove away, his words echoing in my ears. In my kitchen, I looked down at the restaurant dessert in its branded container, the physical evidence of their deceit. Something inside me that had been bending for years finally broke. I sat down at my kitchen table and wept, not from sadness but from the raw pain of betrayal. When the tears finally stopped, I knew one thing with absolute certainty: something needed to change, and I would be the one to make it happen. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. After a lifetime of putting others first, particularly Jacob, I recognized that the time had come to stand up for myself. The betrayal at Romano's wasn't just about one dinner, it was the culmination of a pattern that had been developing for years. My phone rang at 9:15. Jacob's name flashed on the screen. "Good morning, Mom," he said cheerfully. "Just calling to check in on you. Did you try the tiramisu?" "It was delicious," I said, marveling at how easily the pleasant lie came out. "Thank you for thinking of me." "So, about rescheduling that dinner," he continued. "Amanda was thinking maybe next Friday." I was about to respond when I heard Amanda's voice in the background. "Tell her we need a reservation for 7:30, not 6. 6 is too early." "I'll check my calendar and let you know," I said, keeping my voice neutral despite the anger simmering just below the surface. After ending the call, I drove to my bank. Martha, the manager, had been my friend since our children were in elementary school together. I explained what had happened without emotion, presenting it as a financial matter rather than a family crisis. "That's absolutely unacceptable," Sabrina Martha said, her professional demeanor tinged with personal outrage. "Let's look at your accounts and make some changes." For the next hour, we reviewed my finances. I removed Jacob's name as an authorized user on my credit card, something I had added years ago for emergencies. We set up new security questions that only I would know the answers to. Martha also helped me create a separate account for my daily expenses, leaving only minimum balances in accounts Jacob might have knowledge of. "I know this is difficult," Martha said as we finished, "but financial boundaries are important even with family, especially with family." From the bank, I drove to Romano's. The manager recognized me immediately and invited me to sit at a quiet table in the corner. I showed him the credit card statement and asked for details about what had transpired. "Mrs. Wilson, I'm deeply sorry about this situation," he said after hearing my story. "I can confirm that your daughter-in-law specifically instructed our staff to charge everything to your card. She mentioned it was a special gift from you and that you had authorized them to order whatever they wanted." "Did they seem to be enjoying themselves?" I asked, needing to know the full picture. He hesitated before answering. "They appeared to be having a very good time. The gentleman, your son, seemed a bit uncomfortable when they ordered the third bottle of wine, but the lady insisted. She also made a point of mentioning several times that the bill would be, and I quote, taken care of by Mom." I thanked him for his honesty and left feeling strangely empowered by having confirmation of what I had witnessed. On the drive home, I formulated a plan. This situation required more than a confrontation, it needed a carefully orchestrated moment of truth. Once home, I sent a group text to Jacob, Amanda, and my grandchildren. "Family dinner at my house this Sunday at 5. I'm cooking all of Jacob's childhood favorites. No need to bring anything but yourselves." The responses came quickly. Jacob sent an enthusiastic thumbs up. Amanda replied that they had plans but would rearrange things. The grandchildren didn't respond at all, likely having their phones monitored by their parents. For the next 3 days, I prepared meticulously. I cooked Jacob's favorite pot roast, the recipe his grandmother had passed down to me. I baked the apple pie he had always requested for special occasions. I set the table with the good china that usually only came out for holidays. But my preparations went beyond food. I gathered evidence of the pattern of exclusion and financial exploitation. Credit card statements, screenshots of social media posts showing family events I hadn't been invited to, a handwritten list of canceled plans and broken promises over the past 2 years. I also created what I called a memory box. Inside, I placed small items representing the sacrifices I had made for Jacob over the years. The pawn ticket from when I sold my mother's jewelry for his class trip. A photo of us at his college graduation, taken after I had worked overtime for months to help with his expenses. The Christmas list from the year Richard died, showing only gifts for Jacob and none for myself. These weren't meant to make him feel guilty, but to remind him of the foundation our relationship had been built, on a foundation of love and sacrifice that seemed to have been forgotten. Sunday arrived, and with it came a strange sense of calm. I wore a simple blue dress, applied light makeup, and waited for my family to arrive. Amanda's luxury SUV pulled into my driveway at exactly 5 o'clock. Jacob carried a bottle of wine. Amanda brought flowers that still had the grocery store price tag attached, and the grandchildren trailed behind, both absorbed in their phones. Grandma Lily gave me a quick, obligatory hug before returning to her screen. Thomas offered a shy smile, but little else. Amanda immediately took control of the conversation, as she always did. "We had the most amazing brunch at the Westfield Club this morning. You should have seen the spread. Of course it's members only, but Jacob's colleague got us in as guests." The implication was clear: another event. I couldn't have attended even if I had been invited. I smiled and nodded as I served the appetizers I had prepared. Jacob seemed nervous, his eyes darting between me and Amanda. "This looks great, Mom. You went all out." "It's not often I get all of you here together," I said, simply. Throughout the first part of the meal, I made a point of engaging with my grandchildren, asking Lily about her art projects, and Thomas about the science competition he had entered. To my surprise, they gradually became more animated, setting their phones aside as they shared details about their lives that I had been missing. Amanda dominated the conversation whenever possible, dropping references to expensive restaurants, exclusive events, and luxury purchases. Jacob added little, seemingly content to let his wife lead while he enjoyed the food of his childhood. As I served the pot roast, memories of family dinners from Jacob's youth naturally arose. "Remember when you were 10 and insisted on making dinner by yourself?" I said with a genuine smile. "You made macaroni and cheese from a box, but forgot to drain the water." Jacob laughed, relaxing slightly. "Yeah, soup pasta was not my finest culinary moment." For a brief moment, I saw my son again, not the man who had allowed his wife to exclude and exploit his mother, but the boy with the warm laugh and kind heart. It made what I needed to do both harder and more necessary. As we finished the main course, I stood to clear the plates. When I returned from the kitchen, I remained standing at the head of the table. Something in my posture must have signaled a shift, because the conversation died away, and 4 pairs of eyes turned to me. I took a deep breath and said the words I had rehearsed carefully. "Because I discovered what happened at Romano's last week." The silence that followed was absolute. Jacob's face drained of color. Amanda's eyes narrowed dangerously. Even the grandchildren sensed the sudden tension, looking up from their phones with unusual attentiveness. "What are you talking about, Sabrina?" Amanda's voice was sharp, defensive. "I know the dinner wasn't canceled," I continued calmly. "I went to the restaurant for takeout and saw all of you there enjoying the meal I was supposed to pay for, the meal I wasn't invited to join." "Mom, I can explain." Jacob began, his voice unsteady. I raised my hand slightly, and to my surprise, he fell silent. "I know about the 3 bottles of wine, the lobster, and the premium steaks. I know Amanda specifically instructed the staff to charge it all to my card. I know this wasn't the first time I've been excluded from family events." "That's ridiculous," Amanda cut in. "Jacob, tell her she's being dramatic." But Jacob couldn't meet my eyes. His gaze was fixed on the table, his shoulders hunched as if under a great weight. "I've gathered some things I'd like to share with you," I said, bringing out the evidence I had collected and the memory box. For the next 20 minutes, I spoke without interruption, my voice steady as I laid out the pattern of behavior that had become normalized in our family. I showed them the credit card statements, the social media posts, the litany of broken promises, and convenient excuses. Then I opened the memory box and explained each item, not to induce guilt, but to remind Jacob of the foundation of love and respect that should exist between us. When I finished with the artifacts of our shared past, I took another deep breath. "I want to be clear about something," I said, looking at each of them in turn. "I don't regret a single sacrifice I made for you, Jacob. I would do it all again in a heartbeat. But I will not be treated this way anymore. I will not be lied to, excluded, or financially exploited by the people I love most in this world." Amanda stood abruptly. "This is absurd. You're twisting everything to make yourself the victim. We're leaving. Kids, get your things." The grandchildren didn't move their eyes wide as they looked between their grandmother and their mother. "Before you decide to leave, Amanda," I continued in the same calm voice, "you should know that I've already removed Jacob's access to my credit cards. I've spoken with my bank about monitoring unusual activity on my accounts, and I've informed Romano's that any future charges must be verified with me directly in person." Amanda's face flushed with anger. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. Jacob remained, seated, his face a mask of shame and conflict. "You're choosing her over your own mother," Amanda demanded from the doorway. Jacob looked up, tears in his eyes. "No one's choosing anyone right now. Mom deserves to be heard. Please sit down, Amanda." To my astonishment, Amanda hesitated, then slowly returned to the table, though her body language radiated tension and defiance. "I never wanted to have this conversation," I said truthfully. "But sometimes love means being honest, even when it's painful. I love all of you, and I want to be part of your lives, but only if I'm respected as a full member of this family, not as an afterthought or a convenient source of funds." What followed was the most honest conversation our family had ever had. Jacob finally admitted to feeling caught between his wife's expectations and his loyalty to me. Amanda, after initial defensiveness, acknowledged that she had deliberately created distance between me and the family, partly from jealousy over my close relationship with Jacob, and partly from embarrassment about my modest lifestyle, compared to her wealthy parents. The grandchildren, witnessing this raw honesty, contributed their own perspectives. Lily admitted she missed our art sessions and felt awkward about the way I was often excluded. Thomas confessed he had wanted to call me about his science project but had been discouraged from doing so. By the time we had moved to the living room exhausted but somehow lighter, something fundamental had shifted in our family dynamic. Nothing was resolved. Not really. But the truth had been spoken, and that was the essential first step toward healing. As they prepared to leave hours later, Jacob hung back after Amanda and the kids had gone to the car. He embraced me tightly, something he hadn't done in years. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I don't know how I let things get so bad. I promise you things will change." I held him close, this grown man who would always be my little boy in some corner of my heart. "I hope so, Jacob. I really do." As I watched them drive away, I felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and peace. The confrontation I had dreaded for so long was behind me. Whatever came next, I had stood up for myself, and in doing so had given our family a chance to rebuild on a foundation of truth rather than convenient lies. In the days following our family dinner, a heavy silence fell between us. Jacob didn't call, and neither did Amanda. I resisted the urge to reach out first, understanding that they needed time to process everything that had happened. Instead, I focused on strengthening myself for whatever might come next. I met with Martha at the bank again to ensure all my financial protections were firmly in place. She helped me set up automatic bill payments and advised me on creating a will that would protect my assets and clearly outline my wishes. "The money isn't the issue, Martha," I explained as we finished our meeting. "It's the principle. I would give Jacob anything if he asked directly. It's the deception that I can't tolerate anymore." Martha nodded in understanding. "Financial boundaries are just like any other boundaries, Sabrina. They show others how we expect to be treated. This isn't about punishing Jacob, it's about protecting yourself." I also consulted with my longtime family doctor, Dr. Patterson, about documenting my mental competence. I wasn't concerned about dementia, but I wanted to prevent any potential claims that I was becoming confused or unable to manage my affairs. A tactic I'd seen used against Eleanor, another teacher friend, whose children had tried to take control of her finances. By the end of the week, I had created a comprehensive plan to protect myself while leaving the door open for reconciliation. The ball was now in Jacob's court. On Saturday morning, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. I opened it to find Thomas standing on my porch, his bicycle leaning against the railing. "Grandma, can I come in?" he asked, his voice carrying a maturity beyond his 14 years. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, stepping aside to let him enter. "Is everything okay? Do your parents know you're here?" He shrugged as he followed me to the kitchen. "Mom and Dad are fighting a lot. Dad said I could come over if I wanted to. Mom didn't say no exactly." I set a glass of lemonade and some cookies in front of him, giving him space to talk at his own pace. Thomas had always been my quieter grandchild, thoughtful and observant. After his third cookie, he finally spoke. "Was what you said true about them going to the restaurant without you and making you pay?" I hesitated, not wanting to put him in the middle of adult conflicts, but something in his earnest expression told me he needed honesty more than protection. "Yes, it was true," I said gently. "But adult relationships are complicated, Thomas. Your parents and I have some things to work through." He nodded slowly. "Dad's really upset. I heard him crying in the garage last night. He kept saying he messed up and didn't know how to fix it." My heart ached at the image of Jacob crying alone. Despite everything, he was still my son, and his pain would always be my pain too. "Mom says you're overreacting," Thomas continued, his eyes on his lemonade glass. "But she took your name off all her social media tags, and she's been going through old posts and changing stuff." I smiled sadly. "Your mother and I have different perspectives on many things. That's okay. The important thing is that we find a way to respect each other going forward." Thomas stayed for nearly 2 hours. We worked on his science project together, and for a little while it felt like old times. As he prepared to leave, he gave me an awkward but heartfelt hug. "I'm glad you're my grandma," he said simply. Those 5 words healed something in me that I hadn't realized was still bleeding. The next day, I received a text from Jacob, asking if we could meet for coffee, just the two of us. We arranged to meet at a small cafe halfway between our homes, neutral territory for what promised to be a difficult conversation. Jacob arrived looking tired with dark circles under his eyes and his usually neat hair uncombed. He ordered a black coffee and sat across from me, his hands fidgeting with a paper napkin. "Mom, I don't even know where to start," he began, his voice hoarse. "I've been trying to figure out how things got so messed up between us." I waited, giving him space to find his words. This was his moment to take responsibility, and I wouldn't make it easier by jumping in to smooth things over as I had done so many times before. "I've been seeing a therapist," he continued after a long pause. "Just twice so far, but it's helping. He says I have issues with people-pleasing and conflict avoidance. That's why I let Amanda take the lead on family stuff, even when I didn't agree with her decisions." "That sounds like valuable insight," I said carefully. Jacob nodded, still shredding the napkin. "I know that doesn't excuse anything. What I did was wrong. Lying to you, excluding you, letting Amanda use your credit card like that, it was all wrong. I'm so ashamed, Mom." The raw pain in his voice brought tears to my eyes, but I blinked them away. This moment needed clarity, not emotion. "I appreciate your honesty, Jacob. It means a lot to hear you acknowledge those things." He looked up, meeting my eyes directly for the first time. "I want to make things right, but I don't know how. Amanda is, well, she's struggling with all this. She feels attacked and judged." "I understand that," I said. "Change is difficult for everyone. But I need you to understand something, Jacob. I'm not willing to go back to the way things were. I love you and your family deeply, but I won't accept being treated as an accessory to your lives rather than an integral part of it." Jacob nodded slowly. "I get that, Mom. I really do. And I'm working on being more assertive about what matters to me, including my relationship with you." We talked for nearly 3 hours, covering years of small hurts and miscommunications. Jacob revealed that Amanda had always felt intimidated by our close relationship and had worked systematically to create distance between us. He admitted to taking the path of least resistance, allowing her to control family plans, because it was easier than confronting the tension. I shared my perspective too, acknowledging that perhaps I had been too intrusive at times or had expected too much involvement in their daily lives. We found middle ground in our desire to build a healthier relationship moving forward. As we prepared to leave, Jacob handed me an envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "It's a check for the Romano's dinner plus all the other times we've used your credit card without being completely upfront. Amanda doesn't know I'm doing this. I took it from my personal savings." I almost refused it, but recognized that accepting the repayment was an important part of establishing new boundaries. "Thank you, Jacob. This means a lot." In the parking lot, he hugged me tightly. "I'm going to fix this, Mom. I promise." "I know you'll try," I said, patting his back. "That's all any of us can do." The weeks that followed were challenging. Amanda maintained her distance, declining my invitations and making excuses when I asked to see the grandchildren. Jacob was trying calling more frequently and occasionally stopping by on his way home from work, but the strain in his marriage was evident in the tired lines around his eyes. Lily reached out unexpectedly one afternoon, asking if she could spend the weekend with me to work on an art project for school. I agreed, immediately delighted by the opportunity to reconnect with my granddaughter. The weekend was illuminating. Away from her mother's influence, Lily blossomed, sharing stories about school and friends, asking about my teaching days, even showing interest in learning to bake the apple pie that Jacob had always loved. On Saturday evening, as we sat at the kitchen table working on her art project, Lily suddenly set down her paintbrush. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart. Anything." "Are you and Mom ever going to get along? She acts like she hates you, but Dad says we have to respect you, and it's all really confusing." The honesty of her question deserved an equally honest answer. "Your mother and I are very different people, Lily. We see the world differently, and that's okay. We don't have to be best friends, but we do need to find a way to respect each other. That takes time and effort from both sides." Lily considered this. She told Dad she'd rather not come to your house anymore, but then she got really mad when he said we could come without her. That's when they started fighting a lot. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said carefully. "Marriage can be complicated sometimes, especially when families are blending their different traditions and expectations." By Sunday evening, when Jacob came to pick up Lily, I had gained valuable insight into the family dynamics from my granddaughter's perspective. Jacob seemed relieved to see Lily so relaxed and happy, commenting that it was the first time in months he had seen her without her phone glued to her hand. The following week, Jacob called with surprising news. Amanda had issued an ultimatum: either he cut contact with me, or she would take the children and move in with her parents temporarily. To her shock, Jacob had stood his ground. "I told her I wasn't choosing between my mother and my wife, that this wasn't a competition," Jacob explained. "I said I loved her, but I wouldn't be manipulated or controlled anymore, and that my relationship with you was non-negotiable." "What happened?" I asked, holding my breath. She cried, then she got angry, then she agreed to family therapy. Our first session is Thursday. I felt a surge of pride in my son's newfound courage. "That sounds like a positive step, Jacob." "The therapist wants you to join us for a session next week if you're willing," he added hesitantly. Despite my reservations about facing Amanda in such a setting, I agreed. If there was any chance of healing our fractured family, I needed to participate fully in the process. The family therapy session was as difficult as I had anticipated. Amanda was defensive. Jacob was trying too hard to please everyone, and I struggled to express my feelings without seeming accusatory. But by the end of the hour, we had established some basic ground rules for moving forward, the most important being honest communication without triangulation or exclusion. As we left the therapist's office, Amanda approached me directly for the first time since our confrontation. "I'm not ready to pretend everything is fine between us, Sabrina," she said stiffly. "But for Jacob's sake and for the kids, I'm willing to try to find a better way forward." It wasn't an apology, but it was a beginning. "I'll do the same, Amanda," I replied. "That's all any of us can do." The road ahead would not be easy. I knew that. Decades of patterns couldn't be changed overnight. But as I drove home from that session, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, a genuine hope that our family might eventually find its way to a more authentic and respectful relationship, one built on truth, rather than convenient lies and unspoken resentments. The confrontation I had dreaded for so long had ultimately been the catalyst for change that our family desperately needed. By standing firm in my truth and requiring respect, I had not only reclaimed my own dignity, but had potentially saved my son from a lifetime of silent compromises that were slowly eroding his spirit. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen by my family, not as a convenient resource or an obligation to be managed, but as a full and valuable member of the circle we created together. The journey of healing had only just begun, but we had taken the essential first steps. 3 months passed, bringing gradual but significant changes to our family dynamic. Jacob continued his therapy sessions, both with Amanda and individually. I noticed subtle differences in his demeanor, a straightening of his shoulders, more direct eye contact, and most importantly, a willingness to express his own opinions even when they differed from Amanda's. The financial boundaries I had established remained firmly in place. Jacob had honored his promise to repay the money spent at Romano's and had been transparent about family expenses ever since. There were no more surprise charges on my credit card, no more assumptions that I would cover costs without discussion. Amanda's transformation was less dramatic but still noteworthy. Her initial hostility had softened into a cautious politeness. She no longer made cutting remarks about my home or lifestyle, though genuine warmth remained elusive. I had come to accept that Amanda and I might never share the close relationship I had hoped for when Jacob first married her, but mutual respect was a significant improvement over the previous pattern of manipulation and exclusion. The most profound changes were in my relationships with my grandchildren. With the barriers Amanda had constructed now partially dismantled, Lily and Thomas began to visit more frequently. Lily and I restored our Sunday afternoon art sessions, while Thomas often brought his science homework, appreciating my background as a teacher. These visits sometimes occurred without Jacob or Amanda present a new development that indicated growing independence and agency for the teenagers. One Wednesday evening, I received an unexpected call from Thomas. "Grandma, can I ask your advice about something?" he said, his voice serious. "Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" "There's this science competition at school, and I really want to enter, but Mom says it's a waste of time because it won't look as good on college applications as debate club." I considered my response carefully, not wanting to undermine Amanda, but also wanting to support Thomas's interests. "Have you talked to your dad about this?" Yeah, he says I should do what I'm passionate about, but then Mom gets mad at him and they start fighting again. The old pattern was reasserting itself with Jacob caught between his wife's demands and what he believed was right for his children. But this time Thomas was reaching out directly instead of silently accepting the situation. "Why don't you come over this weekend, and we can look at the competition requirements together," I suggested. "Then maybe we can all sit down as a family and discuss the pros and cons." Thomas agreed eagerly, and when Saturday came, we spent several hours researching the competition and preparing a presentation about its value for his future. When Jacob and Amanda arrived to pick him up, Thomas asked if we could all talk. To my surprise, Amanda listened attentively as Thomas explained why the science competition aligned with his interests and future goals. Jacob supported his son but didn't dominate the conversation. I remained mostly silent, allowing Thomas to advocate for himself. When Thomas finished his presentation, Amanda sighed. "I still think debate would be more impressive for college," she said, "but I can see how much this means to you. If your grades stay up in your other subjects, you can enter the competition." The smile that lit up Thomas's face was worth all the difficult conversations of the past months. In that moment, I saw our family beginning to function in a healthier way, with each member's voice being heard and respected. Not everything was resolved, of course. Amanda still scheduled some family events without consulting me, though now Jacob would call separately to invite me. There were still uncomfortable silences and moments of tension during family gatherings, but these were normal family frictions, rather than the systematic exclusion and deception that had characterized our relationship before. 6 months after the confrontation at my dinner table, Jacob invited me to lunch, just the two of us. He seemed nervous but determined as we settled into a quiet corner of the cafe. "Mom, I need to tell you something," he began once we had ordered. "Amanda gave me an ultimatum last week. She said either we move to Seattle to be closer to her parents or she wants a separation." My heart sank. After all the progress we had made, this felt like a deliberate attempt to re-establish the distance that had once existed between Jacob and me. Seattle was over 2,000 miles away. "What did you say?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. Jacob took a deep breath. "I told her I wasn't making any major life decisions based on threats or ultimatums. I said if she wanted to discuss a potential move, we could talk about it rationally, considering everyone's needs, including the kids' schools, my job, and yes, our proximity to you." I squeezed his hand, proud of the man he was becoming. "That sounds very reasonable, Jacob." "She didn't think so," he said with a sad smile. "She's staying with her sister right now, trying to decide what she wants to do. The kids are with me." "I'm so sorry. This must be incredibly difficult for all of you." Jacob nodded, his eyes reflecting both pain and resolve. "It is, but you know what's strange? Part of me feels relieved, like I can finally breathe again." Over the following weeks, Jacob and Amanda began a trial separation. The children split their time between Jacob's home and Amanda's sister's house, an arrangement that seemed to be working surprisingly well. Jacob reported that Lily and Thomas appeared more relaxed without the constant tension between their parents. During this time, I was careful to support Jacob without criticizing Amanda or trying to influence his decisions. This was his marriage, his life, and he needed to find his own path forward. My role was to love him unconditionally and provide a stable presence for my grandchildren during this turbulent time. One unexpected outcome of the separation was Jacob's discovery of his own resilience. Without Amanda managing every aspect of their lives, he had to learn to balance work, parenting, and household responsibilities. To his surprise and mine, he thrived in this new independence, developing a closer relationship with his children and finding satisfaction in creating a peaceful home environment. After 2 months of separation, Amanda agreed to resume couples therapy. Jacob approached these sessions with a new clarity about what he needed in their relationship, including respect for his relationship with me and more democratic decision-making regarding the children. Amanda, having experienced the reality of managing without Jacob's support, seemed more willing to compromise than before. Slowly, tentatively, they began to rebuild their marriage on a more equal foundation. Amanda moved back home, and they established new patterns of communication and decision-making. I remained cautiously optimistic, noticing the positive changes, but aware that old patterns could easily resurface under stress. Throughout this period of family reconstruction, I maintained the boundaries I had established. I no longer automatically said yes to every request or adjusted my schedule to accommodate last-minute changes. I expressed my preferences honestly and expected them to be considered just as I considered the needs and preferences of others. The most profound change, however, was within me. I no longer measured my worth as a mother by Jacob's approval or inclusion of me. I had developed a rich life independent of my role as mother and grandmother, reconnecting with old friends, expanding my volunteer work, and even taking a watercolor class I had been interested in for years. When Jacob and Amanda included me in family events, I participated joyfully, bringing my authentic self to these gatherings. When they didn't, I accepted it without the deep hurt that would have consumed me before. My happiness no longer depended on their validation or inclusion. 9 months after the night at Romano's, our family gathered at my house for Thanksgiving dinner. As I looked around the table at Jacob, Amanda, Lily, and Thomas, I realized how far we had come. The conversation flowed naturally, with everyone contributing. Amanda had brought her famous cranberry salad without being asked, a small but significant olive branch. Jacob seemed relaxed, no longer constantly monitoring the interaction between his wife and mother. The children were engaged and present their phones noticeably absent from the table. We were not a perfect family. We still had disagreements and misunderstandings. Amanda and I would probably never be best friends. But we had found a way to coexist with mutual respect, and that was enough. The love between us was no longer obscured by resentment and manipulation. It was real and imperfect and honest, just as families should be. As we finished our meal, Jacob raised his glass in a toast. To Mom, he said simply, "For teaching us all what true strength looks like." The tears that filled my eyes were not of hurt or betrayal, but of profound gratitude for the journey we had taken together, from deception to truth, from exclusion to belonging, from taking advantage to genuine appreciation. It had been a painful road, but the destination was worth every difficult step. A full year has passed since that fateful night at Romano's, when I discovered my family dining without me at my expense. Looking back, I recognize that moment as a turning point, not just in my relationship with Jacob and his family, but in my understanding of myself and what I deserve. The healing journey hasn't been linear. There were days when old hurts resurfaced, triggering tears I thought I had finished shedding. There were moments when I questioned whether confronting the situation had been worth the upheaval that followed. But as the dust settled and new patterns emerged, I found myself inhabiting a life that felt authentically mine, for perhaps the first time since Richard died 26 years ago. In the months following our family confrontation, I made conscious efforts to expand my world beyond Jacob's family. I reconnected with former colleagues from Lincoln Elementary, meeting monthly for lunch, and lively discussions about books, politics, and the changing world of education. I deepened my commitment to the homeless shelter, taking on a leadership role in their literacy program for children. I joined a walking group for seniors, improving my physical health while forming new friendships. These activities weren't merely distractions from family drama, they were investments in myself, acknowledgments that my life had value and purpose, independent of my role as mother and grandmother. The more I developed these aspects of my identity, the less desperate I felt for Jacob's approval or inclusion. My relationship with my grandchildren flourished in unexpected ways. Without Amanda's filtering influence, Lily and Thomas began to visit me independently, sometimes spending entire weekends at my house. Lily, now 17, confided in me about her college aspirations and boyfriend troubles. Thomas, 15, shared his excitement about science and technology, often bringing over experiments that left my kitchen in disarray, but filled the house with laughter. What surprised me most was how our honest confrontation actually strengthened these relationships rather than damaging them. The grandchildren respected the boundaries I had established and seemed to appreciate the authenticity of our interactions. There were no more eggshells to walk on, no more topics to carefully avoid. Jacob's growth continued to impress and move me. Through his individual therapy, he came to recognize how his childhood as the son of a single mother had shaped his adult patterns. His desperate need to please everyone, his conflict avoidance, his tendency to take the path of least resistance, all stemmed from his unconscious fear of abandonment and desire to protect me from additional burdens. We had several deep conversations about those early years, with Jacob expressing guilt over the sacrifices I had made for him and me, reassuring him that every choice had been made freely and lovingly. These discussions healed old wounds for both of us, allowing us to see each other more clearly as the adults we had become, rather than remaining fixed in our historical roles. Amanda's journey was perhaps the most surprising. While she never directly apologized for her previous behavior, her actions showed a growing respect for my place in the family. She began consulting me about birthday gifts for Jacob, and including me in the planning of family celebrations. When Lily had a minor car accident, Amanda called me, immediately acknowledging my right to know about important events affecting my grandchildren. The separate therapy sessions Amanda attended seemed to help her recognize her own insecurities that had fueled her need to control family relationships. Her wealthy background had given her certain expectations about status and appearances that my more modest lifestyle had threatened. Over time, she came to appreciate the different strengths I brought to our family, particularly my practical approach to problems and unconditional support during difficult times. 6 months after their brief separation, Jacob and Amanda renewed their wedding vows in a small ceremony, attended only by the children and me. The symbolism wasn't lost on any of us, this recommitment, representing not just their marriage but our reconstituted family unit built on more honest foundations. My financial boundaries remained firmly in place. Jacob and I had a frank discussion about inheritance and my wishes for my modest estate. I established a trust with clear provisions for my care if I should become unable to manage independently, removing any ambiguity that could lead to future conflicts. These practical arrangements actually reduced tension by eliminating potential sources of misunderstanding or exploitation. Perhaps the most profound change was in how I viewed myself. The woman who had discovered her family's betrayal at Romano's had been insecure, desperately seeking validation through self-sacrifice and accommodation. The woman I am today understands that love doesn't require erasure of self, that healthy relationships thrive on mutual respect and honesty, rather than manipulation and appeasement. Last week we celebrated Jacob's 44th birthday, at Romano's, returning to the scene of last year's painful discovery. It was Amanda who suggested the location, a symbolic acknowledgement of how far we had come. We sat at the same window table, but this time I was present, included in every moment of the celebration. Jacob insisted on paying, saying it was his turn to treat the family. As I looked around at my son, his wife, and my grandchildren, I felt a deep sense of peace. Not because everything was perfect, not because every hurt had been erased, but because we had found a way to be authentic with each other. The relationships we now shared were richer for having weathered the storm of confrontation and emerged into the clear light of truth. This journey has taught me lessons I wish I had learned decades earlier. That love without boundaries isn't truly love, but dependency. That standing up for yourself doesn't have to mean losing those you care about. In fact, it often leads to more genuine connections. That it's never too late to redefine the terms of your relationships or to reclaim your sense of worth. I understand now that the betrayal at Romano's wasn't really about one dinner or even about money. It was the culmination of years of allowing myself to be diminished in small ways, of prioritizing harmony over honesty, of believing that love meant always putting others first, regardless of the cost to myself. The pain of that night was necessary to break patterns that had been established over decades. Sometimes wounds must be lanced before they can properly heal. The temporary agony of confrontation led to a deeper, more authentic connection than years of peaceful accommodation had achieved. As I enter my 70th year, I find myself more at peace than ever before. I have learned that setting boundaries isn't selfish, but essential, that speaking your truth doesn't have to mean losing love, and that it's never too late to create healthier patterns in even your most long-standing relationships. If my story resonates with you, perhaps you too have allowed yourself to be diminished in the name of family harmony. Perhaps you've swallowed hurts rather than risk confrontation. Perhaps you've convinced yourself that love means endless sacrifice without reciprocity or respect. I hope my experience encourages you to examine your own boundaries and expectations. Are you truly being seen and valued in your relationships? Are you allowing people to treat you in ways that diminish rather than enhance your sense of self? What small steps might you take today to reclaim your worth and insist on the relation self the bras when you self in nudie? Respect you deserve. Life is too short and too precious to spend it seeking approval from those who should freely give their love and respect. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and for others, is to stand firmly in your truth, and require that your boundaries be honored. The family dinner I hosted a year ago, where I finally confronted the patterns of exclusion and exploitation, wasn't the end of our story but a new beginning. By having the courage to speak my truth, I gave all of us the opportunity to build something better, something real, and lasting. That's the paradox I've come to understand. Sometimes letting go of what you thought you wanted creates space for what you truly need. By releasing my desperate grip on family harmony at any cost, I created the possibility for genuine connection based on mutual respect and honesty. Today, as I look at my family, I see not perfection but authenticity. And that I've learned is worth all the difficult conversations, all the tears, all the uncertain moments when I feared I might lose them forever. The truth, painful as it sometimes is, truly does set us free. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? What helped you find the courage to speak your truth? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of life's complicated journeys. And remember to share with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to reclaim their worth. Thank you for listening, and may you find the courage to honor your own boundaries with love and dignity.